Lamada. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Lamada. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing.
Good morning, and welcome to Story Time. Thank you so much for joining in. Happy Thursday, wherever you are, you and your loved ones, and everybody else that is joining us today. We say hello to you. Thank you so much for being here and welcome. Please, as always, let us know where you're joining in from and who is joining in with you. Always indeed a pleasure to be here together, reading stories together, learning together, and of course, building community. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome on this bright day out here in Oakland. I hope that where you are, it is good for you as well. Thank you so much for joining in, and I know that there's been heat wave in parts of the country, and I hope that we're finding spaces that are cool and finding spaces that indeed help us, and also we also have shelter indeed. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime, and welcome. Today we're bringing you another special book, and this one is coming to you from Candlewick Press, and it is called Box. Henry Brown mails himself to freedom. And this one is coming to you from CAROLE, Boston, Weatherford, and illustrations by Michele Wood. A big thank you indeed to Candlewick Press for allowing us to share this one right here on Storytime. So please get comfortable, get cozy, and get ready for this lovely story that we have together. An inspiring story indeed, but also it is one that narrates the harrowing life and conditions that Black people have had to go through slavery and many things that have happened since. Thank you so much for joining in, as we'll be learning from each other, teaching each other, and indeed just reminding us of some of our history, awful history that we hope should not be repeated and cannot be repeated. Thank you so much for joining in, and welcome. We'll be reading that one today, and of course then I would love to know where you are. So please let us know that you are here. And indeed, please let us know your thoughts on all the books that we read here on Storytime. And indeed, if you have recommendations, please send them our way so that we can bring them to Storytime and share them here, and so others can learn as well. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime, and good to see you all already with us. Good morning to you. How are you doing? Amanda West, thank you so much for joining in today. Glad that you're here indeed. And of course, Sarah and Nathan, we appreciate you as well. Thank you for being here. And I hope that you're well. Yes, it's still in St. Louis. Thank you so much for joining in, and say no complaining from you, though. We're lucky to be able to stay cool, hoping others are too. Very important indeed. Good morning to you, and happy Thursday indeed, Sarah and Nathan out in hot and humid St. Louis. Thank you so much for sharing that. And indeed, yes, being thankful for all those little things, with small things, and also having the bigger picture in mind. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you're still having so much fun out there at camp. Thank you for being here. And Amanda West, we appreciate you. Thank you for all you do for the little ones. Thank you so much for being here. If you're joining us for the recording, thank you for being here. As you know, Storytime comes to you live at 7 a.m. Pacific time, but we're also here at 11 a.m. Pacific time for the recording. And of course, we're here anytime, 24/7, and our archives at storytimewithmrlimada.com, on our Facebook, as well as YouTube right here. Thank you so much for joining in, and appreciate you. So find us in all those platforms and get to enjoy beautiful stories. And if you have these books at home, I encourage you to get a copy and read along as we go. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning to you, Amanda Waltman. How are you doing today? And a very awake baby Bia. How are you doing, sweetheart? Good to see you here today. And good to see that you're feeling fitter and better. Thank you so much for joining in Story Time. And a very tired Amanda. Well, thank you, Amanda. We know all you do. Thank you so much for being here, trying to get sunny Seattle. Good luck. Good luck. Hopefully today is the day that the sun shines bright out there in Seattle. Thank you so much for being here. And it is pretty late on in the year. We should have been sunshine all day today. Big hugs to everyone. You say, well, big hugs right back at you. Thank you so much for joining us on Storytime, and glad that you are here. We are reading a wonderful book indeed, one that just really paints a picture of how hard and just people had it, especially living through, like enslaved people, and just yeah, you will see as we read the book. There are even parts that I might skip over just because of it's just so it's such heavy a topic, but I think it is one that we needed to share today, and one that we needed to talk about, and and just see where we're coming from, and hopefully that shapes a better way forward, and we think critically about these things, and how certain communities, certain populations, Black people and people of color indeed have been pushed aside, and have been really dragged through the mud, for lack of a better term there. So let's read this one, and together we continue to learn, and that's what it is. Those uncomfortable conversations at times, they are needed so that we can move forward. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. Betty Graydon, how are you doing out in Florida? Good to see you with us on the live. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm glad that you're here with us. Please get ready for our story for today. We'll be back on the other side. And now a short message from Zeta Elliott. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime.
Hi, my name is Zeta Elliott, and I am the author of 40 books for kids, including Dragons in a Bag and A Place Inside of Me. You're watching Storytime with Mr. Lamada.
Welcome back indeed, and a big thank you to Zeta Elliott for that lovely message. And as you heard, over 40 books for children, and congratulations to you, Zeta, too, and just congratulations to the children, the people of Richmond. There was a school district that voted just yesterday, I think. It was a close vote, though, 4-3, on keeping Zeta Elliott's book, A Place Inside of Me, on the shelves, on the school shelves. And so that is a big victory indeed for many right reasons, and for these topics need to be discussed. Books, different voices need to be heard. And so some people were really working hard to get books like Zeta Elliott's out of the schools, out of our children's hands. But I'm glad to say that the vote went our way. It was good. And yes, those voices keep being represented. Zeta Elliott, keep doing your thing. Thank you so much. All right. So for our story for today, as you can see, this one just really is one that makes me think and reflect. And I hope that it does that for you today too. This one is called Box. Henry Brown mails himself to freedom. And just so you know a little bit, in case you don't know the story of Henry Brown, which you get to know by the end of this book, but just the way it is written, it is of course celebrated poet Carol Boston Weatherford powerfully narrates Henry Brown's story of how he came to ship himself in a box from slavery to freedom. Told in stanzas of 6 lines each line represented one side of a box, and augmented with historical records and excerpts from Henry Brown's own writing. Box is a moving story about the cost and fragility of freedom. Box is a moving story about the cost and fragility of freedom. So let us read on together. Here we go. A little something there, geometry. How many sides does a box have? How many sides to a box? 6. All right. This one is called Box. Henry Brown mails himself to freedom. It is written by CAROLE Boston Weatherford and illustrations by Michele Wood. And we're reading this one with permission of the publishers, Candlewick Press. I was born about 45 miles from the city of Richmond in Louisa County in the year 1815. This is a little over 200 years ago. I entered the world a slave in the midst of a country whose most honored writings declare that all men have a right to liberty. The irony, right? I was a slave because my countrymen had made it lawful in utter contempt of the declared will of heaven, for the strong to lay hold of the weak and to buy and sell them as marketable goods. And this is an excerpt from a narrative of the life of Henry Box Brown, written by Henry Box Brown himself. Wind. An autumn breeze blows maple leaves while I sit on my mother's lap. Slavery is a cruel wind, she says, sweeping children away from parents, scattering families far and wide. She shivers and holds me close. Work. Like my 7 sisters and brothers, I am put to work as a child. First serving my master and mistress, then learning plantation chores in the hot sun. Every few months, I trudged 20 miles with my brother carrying grain to the mill. Imagine that. Every few months, I trudged 20 miles with my brother carrying grain to the mill. Brutality. Treks to the market take my brother and me past plantations, where we encounter other blacks, some shoeless, coatless, nearly skin and bone in burlap shirts and threadbare pants. We share our bread and meat with them. In the slave quarter, they recount the savage beating that many of them got from having been baptized just the night before. Split. I am 15 when my master dies and wills my family to his 4 sons. My parents, brothers, sisters, and I, flung apart as if dandelion puffs. I land in the young master's Richmond tobacco factory. He warns the overseer never to whip me. Richmond. A sea of red brick rises from the James River. Slavery, the cornerstone of it all. See the slave pens, whipping posts, auction houses, storefronts, tobacco factories, and grit mills, all busy. Folks in packets and boats with cargo float along canals, people everywhere. And this one, I will, this is one of those parts that just really drives home a certain point, but I'll leave that conversation. I know that not everybody that's watching sometimes has an adult with them, but I'll leave this part out so that if you can get this book at home box and read it with your children, read it with your adults and talk about it. I encourage that conversation, but this is a part that talks about enslaved preacher Nat Turner and the uprising that happened, and definitely I would encourage you to read more about this at home. But after Nat Turner's revolt and the death that happened from that, we move on to a part called Fear, and it says, Fear. David Walker's appeal called for slaves to rise up. Nat Turner answered that call with rebellion. A massacre, whites called it, so scared that they raised the militia. But slaves face fear every day. Fear of the lash, of being sent farther south, fear of their families being sold off, fear of never, ever being free. Laws. And we have to be careful about laws too. Blacks may not carry canes, but must carry free papers or a slave pass. Freed slaves must leave Virginia within a year of return to bondage, within a year or return to bondage. No more than 5 blacks may gather except in church. Groups of blacks may worship only with a white preacher present. It is unlawful to teach blacks to read and write. Unwritten rule. As long as there is slavery, no blacks are safe. Overseers. When one black overseer dies, he is replaced by Stephen Bennett, whose peg leg won't let him sneak up to eavesdrop on the slaves. He gives 100 lashes for coming a few cents or pounds short on a task. The next overseer, John F. Allen, is fiendish. When a slave who often sang takes sick, Allen has him dragged to the factory for 200 lashes. The whipping doesn't cease until the ailing man faints. Crop. In March, sow tobacco seeds in plant beds. Fertilize with fish meal. Late spring. Transplant to the field. Plow row by row. When the plants bloom, break off the tops. Pull suckers from the foliage so leaves will grow. Late summer, split stalks 3/4 of the way down. Cat plants above the ground. Curing. One night in 1839, Stephen, an enslaved blacksmith on the Slade plantation in Coswell County, North Carolina, fell asleep. In the log barn, he let the wood fires beneath the tobacco die. He used charcoal to relight the fires. The tobacco leaves turned golden. Thus, bright-leafed and flue curing were born. Stephen's master profited from the tobacco and discovery. Processing. The bright leaves arrive by the barrel, by the cartload, strip stems from the tobacco, flavor leaves in cauldron of licorice and sugar, press into lumps and twist by hand. In the machine house, pack into boxes and casks, lay in the sweat house for 30 days, then sell. Nancy. At work, days drag on like a long winter till I meet Nancy, an enslaved washerwoman whose laughter is the sweetest music I know. To marry her, I need permission from her master. He grants it. He promises never to sell her. Splits us up, never to sell her or split us up. Me and my Nancy jump the broom. Family. Barely a year later, Nancy's master goes back on his word. She and my children change hands like seasons, each master worse than the last. The last one, Mr. Cottrell, agrees to keep my family if I feed them, house them, and pay him. Small price, I figure. At First African Baptist Church, I joined the choir. Thank God for keeping my family and faith intact. Worth. Nancy had been sold to Joseph Colquitt, a cruel saddler with an even meaner wife. Mrs. Colquitt copped that Nancy's breastfeeding and refined manners did not befit one enslaved. So her husband sold Nancy for $450. 4 months later, Mrs. Colquitt realized Nancy's worth and begged her husband to buy her back. He did for $500. Deal. A second saddler, Mr. Cottrell, told me that my wife's master, Mr. Cockett, aimed to sell her. Mr. Cottrell would step in and buy her if I would chip in $50 for of the $650 asking price. For Nancy and my children, he promised that if I did, he would prevent her from being sold off. To me, that seemed like a good bargain. Anchored. The good Lord anchored me and Nancy in the Word and has given us 3 children. And then, blessed news, another babe on the way in a matter of months. Our family tree, my treasure, bears precious fruit. Our harvest, though bountiful, yields a bitter truth. We have less power to stay than the weeds with shallow roots. Our harvest, though bountiful, yields a bitter truth. We have less power to stay than weeds with shallow roots. Trade. Whites and blacks, enslaved and free, haggle in the marketplace. Peddlers hawking eggs, chickens, potatoes, peas, and corn sticks. From blacks, free blacks are barbers, blacksmiths, shoemakers, and shopkeepers, seamstresses, and domestics. They are allowed to buy land and own buildings. If I had their money, I would buy my family. Railroad. Richmond is not just a port city, but also a railway hub. 3 lines converge: the Louisa Rail, the Richmond and Petersburg Railroad, and the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad. I see the trains and imagine boarding one, bound north, past the Mason-Dixon line, toward freedom. More. Nancy's master orders her to wash his clothes and me to stuff his pockets with silver. I tell him none is due and I have none to spare. You will pay, he threatens, slamming a door. As Nancy sobs, I hug her tight. Our children flock around us, bracing against farewell. Snatched. That very day, Nancy's master snatches my family and pens them up for sale. Robbed of all that matters, I beg my master's help, but he gives me not 1 cent of my hard-earned wages that he's pocketed. He says I dare not to meddle. Hell, this is a reason that the slave jail at Shopper Bottom is known as the Devil's Half Acre. Upstairs, the tavern and boarding house is run by the bully toddler Robert Lumpkin, who lives there with his slave wife Mary. Downstairs, a holding pen and a whipping room for breaking slaves. I cannot bear the thought of my family locked inside. Tokens. I buy some tokens to take to my beloved ones in jail. Small sacrifice for one last embrace. On my way, a young man warns that I might be jailed myself for lies that my master had told the jailer. The youth makes the delivery in my stead, but mistaken for me, he is thrown in jail until my family's testimonies free him. The vexed jailer kicks the youth all the way into the street. Heaven. For one last glimpse of my beloved ones, I watch the slave chain pass, bound for North Carolina. Father, father, my child yells from a wagon. I see my wife, grab her hand, and walk 4 miles with her. We shall meet in heaven, I whisper. Then she is gone. Lord, what more have I to lose? Friends, when I needed a free man to enter a contract for me so that I could rent a house for my family, James Cesar Anthony Smith signed his name. When I needed money to pay Mr. Cottrell's debt and collect my household goods before auction, Dr. Smith had the remedy, $17. Church, leaning on God. I sing at church with my friend, Dr. Smith. After several hymns, he kneels and sobs. The sin of human bondage suddenly clear to him. He vows never to worship at another church that twists the Bible to uphold slavery. I too need to take a strong stance. UGRR, the Underground Railroad. I have heard whispers of a way that is neither underground nor a railroad, yet it goes by that name, though only in hushed tones. Secret routes, safe houses, songs of stealing away. In those songs, I hear a yearning, the same longing in my soul. And plan. From that day on, I ponder an escape. But how, with only $166 to my name? While I'm at work, prayer shows me the way. I pay a carpenter to build a wooden box, 2 feet deep, 3 feet wide, and 2.5 feet long. I drill 3 holes in the box for air. Courage. What have I to fear? My master broke every promise to me. I lost my beloved wife and our children, all sold south. Neither my time nor my body is mine. The breath of my life is all I have to lose. The breath of life is all I have to lose, and bondage is suffocating me. Help. I have a plan, a box, and a strong resolve, but I cannot pull off the escape alone. I need an accomplice to close the lid and a traveling companion to keep the crate upright. I offer to pay Samuel Smith, a trusted shoemaker. He doubts I can survive the trip, but agrees to go with me. Letter. Dear Mr. McKim, we applaud your righteous abolitionist work. We humbly request your help in a daring mission to deliver a slave to freedom as freight. We would be grateful if you agree to receive the box. Respectfully, Mr. Samuel Smith. Excuse. If I miss work without permission, that will spark suspicion. I need a few days off with permission to fool my master. The overseer examines my hurt finger but denies me to leave until I pour acid on the wound to make it worse. This time, the overseer glimpses bone. He is convinced this sore is my head start to liberty. Manifest. Inside one box to flee another. Inside one box to flee another. Inside, I take a bladder of water and drill to bore air holes and cram my 200-pound body into the box. Samuel Smith and James Smith nail the box shut. Inside, I feel the hammering. They mark the box, Philadelphia, this side up, and hope I can pass as dry goods. Baggage. The Smiths send my box to Adams Express, where I am turned upside down, loaded onto a wagon, and driven to the train station, to the train depot. A man tumbles me to the baggage car, and I fall on my right side. My heart races as the train chugs away. Sweat. At Potomac Creek, my box is moved to a steamer and again placed upside down. My eyes bulge, my veins swell until I break a sweat. Then two travelers knock my box over to sit on it. I wonder what's inside, one man says. The mail, the other one says. Ouch. In Washington, I am carted right side up from the steamboat to the train depot. This box must be full of lead, a man says, shoving me from the wagon. I land upside down and my neck cracks. I black out from the pain. Express. When I awaken, two men are debating whether there is room on board for my box. It will have to sit here till tomorrow, says one man. It came express, says another. It has to go now. I am put on the train upside down, but get shifted onto my right side. Still, my limbs cramp. Wait, 27 hours, 350 miles. Philadelphia, a voice bellows. I wait, but the friend I'd paid does not come. Hours pass, and no one greets me. I pray this crate will not be my coffin. That evening, a man claims my box. Free. After a short wagon ride, I am lagged inside. Folks gather around. I keep quiet. What did the telegraph say? A man asks. Someone raps on the lid. Is all right within? All right, I reply. They pry open the lid, and I step out a free man. I burst into song. And this is a letter that was found that is also in here. It says, Dear Gay, it was to the anti-slavery office in Philadelphia on March 26, of 1849. Here is a man who has been the hero of one of the most extraordinary achievements I ever heard of. He came to me on Saturday morning last in a box, tightly hooped, marked this side up by Overland Express from the city of Richmond. Did you ever hear of anything in your life to beat that? It was a regular old store box, grooved at the joints and braced at the ends, leaving but the very slightest crevice to admit the air. Nothing saved him from suffocation but the free use of water and the constant fanning of himself with his hat. The this side up on the box was not regarded, and he was twice put with his head down towards resting with his back against the end of the box, his feet braced against the other. The second time was on board the steamboat. This nearly killed him. He says the veins in his temples were as thick as his fingers. I had been expecting him for several days and was in mortal fear of all the time, lest the arrival should only be the signal for calling the coroner. He will tell you the story. He will tell you the whole story. Don't publish this affair to allow it to be published. It would compromise the Express and prevent all others from escaping in the same way. Box. At the New England Anti-Slavery Convention, I sing the hymn. That was on my lips when I first breathed liberty. Touring anti-slavery gatherings, I tell my story and hope my song lyrics and new book. For abolitionists, I am tangible proof that the enslaved crave freedom. I earned the nickname Box. Price. Even if I could find my family, I would need $1,000 or more to buy a woman and 4 children out of slavery. Saving that much could take the rest of my days. If I could elude bounty hunters that long, my family would have to flee to Canada to risk capture. A dark shadow of helplessness looms over me. Sleepless. Is my beloved, my Nancy, still with our children? Or have they been sold again? Sold apart, perhaps? Whom can I ask to write letters, make inquiries? If I could raise enough money to buy my family's freedom, whom could I trust with the transaction? If I ever see them again, how will I press on? If I never see them again, how will I ever press on? Mirror. Convinced that my saga must be seen to be believed, I enlist a Boston artist to create a moving panorama, a backdrop of massive paintings in the round. Henry Box Brown's Mirror of Slavery tours New England, and spectators immerse themselves in the very institution I fled. I reenact my unboxing, complete with the replica of the crate. Fugitive. In Providence, Rhode Island, I am attacked on the street, a kidnapping plot I suspect to return me to Richmond. Soon after, the Fugitive Slave Bill becomes law. Boston is crawling with bounty hunters. Price on my head. I sail to England with my panorama and my pain-filled past. Across the Atlantic, I begin to build a new life. England. My panorama tours Liverpool, Manchester, Lancashire, and Yorkshire. Then money squabbles lead my partner, James Smith, to write abolitionists complaining that I have not tried to buy back my family. How would I find them? And whom could I trust to liberate them? Not a day passes that I do not long for my dear wife and children. Yet my anti-slavery work is now stained. News. In England, news reaches me of Anthony Burns, an enslaved preacher who fled Richmond for Boston at age 18. In 1854, he is captured and tried under the Fugitive Slave Act. A riot leaves a U.S. Marshal dead. Back down south, Burns is jailed at the Devil's Half-Acre and obtains a Bible from Lampkin's slave wife. Abolitionists buy his freedom. Showman. Just as my escape transformed me into a free man, I reinvent myself on stage. For my one-man show, I cast a new character, a well-dressed African prince. Later, I spice up the act with hypnotism. Audiences laugh at the volunteers under my spell. I crown myself king of the mesmerizers. Magician. My new life brings a second chance for happiness. I remarry and we have a daughter. I take them home. In the United States, I call myself Professor H. Box Brown. I perform magic tricks, but still portray the African prince and climb from a box that delivered me to freedom. After all, my escape was my finest illusion. Axiom. Freedom is fragile. Handle with care. Freedom is fragile. Handle with care. And then on the back, there's a whole timeline of the events that we just read about. And I encourage you to find this book at home and read it, and especially to the part about Nat Turner, and read about that that part and just see some of the harrowing things that enslaved people went through. And, those effects are far reaching. We still feel those today. There's so much that is happening that is as a result of that. But I thought we should share this book today to just remind ourselves of some of these things. And also, because sometimes we may forget, we may think these things were so long ago and so on, but remind ourselves too that the effects of those things are far reaching, and we have a role to play. And also, freedom is fragile. You look at what's happening right now, Roe v. Wade, or indeed, you look at same-sex marriage and everything that is happening around that. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be playing our part in our communities, making sure that we vote if we can, making sure that we are out there at protests, making sure that we are out in our communities, ensuring that everyone is free and everyone is given a fair shot at life. So thank you so much for joining in today. And I just thought we should read this book. On Storytime, I've resisted reading stories mainly about talking about slavery, because we want to bring that there's more to Black people than slavery, but also it is important every now and then to go back and look at things and remind ourselves of where we're coming from and why things may be the way they are now. And we see too, sometimes just because something is legal, just because it does not make it right. Just because something is legal, it does not make it right. And we have to continue being vigilant, continue looking inside ourselves, and indeed holding our communities accountable too. And this month we're celebrating Pride Month. We know that there have been attacks, people threatening violence on the LGBT plus community, and we condemn that. We do not want that, and we want to make sure that our voices are heard. And please, if you can, reach out, even if it's just a message, whether it's on Instagram or somewhere, reach out to somebody, let them know you care, let them know that you are there. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime. This is a powerful book, and I encourage you to find it and have these conversations at home. And this one is called Box. Henry Brown mails himself to freedom. Thank you so much for joining me on Storytime today. It is indeed a place that we can learn together. We continue to learn from each other. And yeah, when you look at the story of just, Henry Brown, to go through that, to think, to lose your children, see them be sold off, be taken away in a wagon, and you cannot do anything about it, and to have to escape, to put yourself in a box for over 350 miles, in uncomfortable situations that almost kill him, and it's a lot. And I know that, we laugh a lot here at Storytime, but also sometimes I think it is important to remind ourselves of these harrowing conditions that, our ancestors have been through, and our fellow Americans, human beings, people with human rights, or expected to have those human rights. So what are we doing? And indeed, how do we hold our leaders accountable for in our communities? Thank you so much for joining me on Storytime today. As you can tell, this one is definitely a topic that today has had me reflecting from the time I was looking at this book. It's been a while that I've had this book, and I've been thinking of it, when would be the right time to bring it and share it here with you all. And it felt right this time. It felt right to bring it, and also just to share this. And if anything that we leave with today, I just want us to leave with the axiom from the book itself, just statement of fact: freedom is fragile. Handle with care. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. Please do join me tomorrow again for another story. And this time we'll be bringing from Deborah Underwood and Meg Hunt. And this one is Interstellar Cinderella, to finish off a round of our week here on Storytime. Thank you so much for being here with me. Absolutely appreciate each and every one of you for being here. You make Storytime what it is. You make this community what it is. And I just want to absolutely appreciate each and every one of you. Let us have these conversations at home. Let's find ways of talking to our little ones about it. They are the future. They are the ones that will be, the custodians of this earth, of this country, of the human rights and everything else important. So let us remember that we need to guide them and teach them, and indeed learn from them as well, because they are the best teachers for sure. I am in the classroom many times with little ones. I do not see the hate. I do not feel the hate. But what happens when we go out to our communities and you start to see that? So it shows that somewhere something happens. But when those kids are there, they're just innocent, and we teach them these things. We teach them to love. We teach them to hate. So how can we be proactive? What can we do? Thank you so much for joining me on Storytime. And thank you so much indeed, Amanda West. You say, what an incredible book. Children's literature is so important for sharing and shaping. Yes, thank you for the author and the librarians, our boards of education who know it is important to share the important and hard stories. And thank you so much. Absolutely appreciate it. It is one that I definitely wanted to share today. And a big thank you to Candlewick Press, as you mentioned there too, for allowing us to share it here on Storytime. They've played such an important role in sharing these books and stories and authors. Well, thank you so much, Amanda. And I want to just thank the parents too, you adults out there who make sure that our little ones come in even for these hard stories and stay with us to continue learning and to continue, shaping each other. Thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you, Amanda, as well. Amanda Waltman, you say, inside one box to flee another. Right. Very, very powerful words there indeed. And wow, books like this need to be in schools. It's ridiculous to me that slavery was glossed over so heavily in my education. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, these conversations need to happen. And thank you. Let us definitely remember there are ways we can look up these books, find these books from our libraries, and begin that education with our children. And indeed, also, the education boards that Amanda West mentions there too, like, let us hold them accountable. And indeed, the thank you to the ones that voted and allowed for books like Zetta Elliott's, for books like this to be in our schools, for our kids to learn and to learn the actual truth, and that's the only way that healing will begin to happen. And that's one of the things I think that America has done wrong, is the denial of these things happening, or just the seeming like we won't even talk about it. It's as though if we ignore it, then it will just go away. No, we need to talk about it. We need to heal. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining in. I am glad that we were here together today to share in this amazing book, powerful book. Thank you indeed for being here. I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. Indeed, a day that is helps you. So we reflect and move forward and see how we can participate in our communities more proactively. Thank you so much for being here on Storytime. Please have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day. I know a heavy topic to start from, but indeed one that is very important and much needed. Much love from me, and I will see you again tomorrow for more Storytime. Much love from me. Bye-bye, everybody. I'll see you again in the morning.
Starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Lamada. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing soon. Story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait to be hearing. Brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait to be hearing